have a special guest with me here. Her name is Affiong Affiong. She has produced, or she's working on a documentary on the life of Kwame Nkrumah. Affiong Affiong is the director, executive director of Moya wa Taifa, a Pan-African Women's Solidarity Network. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Quite interesting, talking about Ghana at this point and Kwame Nkrumah. Why now and why Nkrumah?
I mean, I thought that was an interesting intro about the Redeemer thing. That was a title that the people gave him. But on a more serious note, Nkrumah continues to remain relevant to us today as 21st century Africans because his vision and his work and his agenda, is still outstanding. Because imperialism, cut short the trajectory of the African Revolution at that time in the early to mid 60s, when there was the coup in Ghana, the infamous 24th February 1966 coup in Ghana. So Nkrumah is still an outstanding issue. I think the topic of, or the persona of Kwame Nkrumah actually needs to be studied by Africans, especially, and when I say Africans, I mean those of us from the continent and the diaspora. So whether we're African Americans or Africans from the continent or Africans from, the West or wherever, Nkrumah is a central cause, because the vision is outstanding.
What is the vision? Is it Pan-Africanism or is it more than that?
Well, Pan-Africanism is a global phenomenon, where as Africans we come together in our strength, 1 billion strong in the world, so that is the outstanding vision. And Pan-Africanism for what? For us to complete the African Revolution. What is the African Revolution? It's about us unifying, and liberating ourselves, in terms of self-determination, access to our resources. I mean, as Nigerians, that's something, we know that is outstanding in terms of how we see our country or the continent, for example, degenerating right before our eyes. So Pan-Africanism is the biggest thing you could have for us as Africans. There's nothing bigger than that.
So when you look at Africa today and look at the kind of leaders we have across Africa, do you think such an idea is something that is acceptable to Africans of today?
Well, it's not acceptable to the class of African leaders we have today. And Nkrumah wrote that, and he spoke about that in his books. He has about 18 books to his credit, And I think that people must take the trouble, to Google this information up, because I think these books are actually available on the internet, to be read. There's class struggle in Africa, which, gives a breakdown, a detail of what's happening to us on the continent. Some of us actually see Nkrumah as a prophet, a political prophet, one who came before his time, one who tells us of things that are yet to come. There was another book for which, the United States of America particularly went after him, Neo-Colonialism, the final stage of imperialism. Now, the situation we have on the continent today of the kind of leaders is called, that's what he termed as neo-colonialism. And neo-colonialism simply means a new kind of colonialism, that we've replaced the white faces. We've been able to drive out the Europeans, and they've been replaced by a black class, a black elite class of exploiters and oppressors. So, he spoke about all of that.
Now, let's go back, because I know from later I know about Nkrumah that in the 40s he went back to Ghana and started leading the trade unions and fighting the British to get independence. In fact, he proposed during one constitutional conference that there should be a House of Chiefs. He was trying to implement his idea, and he became president in 1952 and was there till 1966. What stopped him from accomplishing these ideas in Ghana?
Oh, he accomplished a lot of them, he accomplished a lot of them until the coup. And this was a CIA-backed coup. And the coup was also assisted by the British MI5 and the French intelligence services. But, when you say what stopped him, nothing stopped him, and he accomplished a lot of it. Ghana, in the late 50s and the 60s, had nuclear energy, had nuclear facilities. Now, do you see the impact of that? That somebody had the vision, to actually lay the groundwork for nuclear facilities way back in the 50s. Ghana, through Nkrumah, was preparing, and had, undergone the stages of industrialization, had a whole lot of factories, schools, educational systems, the industry was being developed. Ghana, under Nkrumah, had developed social services, culture, arts. He was preparing us for industrialization. So it wasn't that anything stopped him during his time. And he was only in power, I think, for about 9 years, a very short time. But he laid the groundwork for all of that. And that is the precise reason why the imperialists, like I said, the CIA, the British MI6, the intelligence service, and the French intelligence service, got rid of him in 1966, because he was going to take us to the promised land.
Well, that looks like a narrative that it's not the whole narrative, because I know that as president, he passed laws towards the end of his term before he was overthrown, banning strikes. He was detaining opponents without trial. So how don't you think that I know that I'm not saying that the CIA, they don't plan coups in Africa, but he has, at that point, he lost support of people. And that if he was as popular as he was at the beginning, there would have been kind of reaction that would be different from what happened when the coup happened.
This is one of the things that we hope to be exploring in the documentary, because, I must be very open and honest. As Africans, generally, we're very gullible. We're very gullible by Western media, Western propaganda, Western agendas. I know that right now in the U.S., I think, I'm not sure if it's the Senate or the House of Reps, they've just passed a law. Is it that Obama he's put it through, a law that will allow them to detain people indefinitely that they consider as terrorists or as threats to the United States. Even the Patriots Law, that, the U.S. passed. You don't hear Africans, having a discussion about the undemocratic nature of that. But let's leave that for a moment, and go back to Ghana. Nkrumah, was prosecuting the African Revolution. As you know, amongst us as Africans, which we have on the continent today, we have a lot of enemies within. People who aim, to hijack the African Revolution. And they've done that successfully now as we have it. So that was the context in which Nkrumah was operating. You had a situation in Ghana where any law that he wanted to pass, it didn't matter what it was, people would object. The opposition in Ghana used to actually travel to the UK, who was the colonial master, to urge the Queen and the Parliament, the British Parliament, not to allow specific laws to go through, not to allow independence. And that's one thing that we don't know as younger Africans, from another generation. And there was a generation of people before us who actively campaigned against us having independence, because they felt, that we were not ready for independence. And this is the same racist mentality that white people had, that, they're not ready for self-government now, And so they're like children, it's like children. You don't let a child have a bank account or get a mortgage because they're not ready. So this is how they saw us, and this is how a lot of our people also viewed us. So I'm saying that Nkrumah was anti all of these people. So we have to be clear when we discuss all these issues of human rights, and opposition. Now let's give a few modern day examples. Zimbabwe. When Mugabe, the veterans started attacking, the farmers, the white farmers who owned virtually all the land in Zimbabwe, that's the only time the BBC and CNN picked up that story, because it now affected white people. Do you see? We have to understand history and trajectories, and not feed into Western agendas.
Now, let's look at the history, because I know he operated at the period in history when you have the capitalist and the socialist bloc. Yes. So he allied with the Soviet Union, the socialist bloc. Okay, the same thing with Patrice Lumumba.
Yes.
So they were in the same camp. I understand what happened to them. Now, in talking about today's Africa, that division is no longer there.
Yes, not as explicit.
It's a different setup in terms of the influence in the world.
It's not terribly different, and I'll tell you why. Now remember that the Africa of today, say Mugabe's Zimbabwe or Gaddafi's Libya, they have the benefit of history, of experience, of Nkrumahs and the Lumumbas. Whereas the Nkrumahs and the Lumumbas did not have the benefit of any prior African experience. They were path openers. They were the first people, they had to go and open the path. So do you see? So in that context, that's relatively different. But as far as imperialism is concerned, imperialism being the Western powers, the story is still the same. Are you for African people, or are you for the Western agenda? So do you see the point I'm trying to make, that it looks as if it's different, but it's really not different, because you also have a Thomas Sankara, in that kind of historical trajectory. So the things about Lumumba and Nkrumah, in a way, also apply in terms of the situation to what happened in Zimbabwe. And sorry, I don't think I made the point in Zimbabwe, which had started, was that they also crashed the Zimbabwean economy. Do you see? So these are the things that they do, and they're able to stir up dissent. If today we had a government in Nigeria, for example, that was anti-Western, they would immediately, find, ways of stirring up dissent. The point dissent comes from outside, and, in Nkrumah's case, they crashed the price of cocoa. Now, when they crash the price of cocoa, obviously, people feel these things in their pockets, Same thing they did in Zimbabwe. So I'm saying that we must study history and be able to apply and understand things so that we're not, doing historical analysis like naive people that, but the people were not happy, That's it.
Okay, so in this context that you've created now, so how do you, as African leader, operate when you are dependent? You are not independent. You can't function without getting loan from getting loan from the international community. How do you operate? How do you?
Well, you can
because Nkrumah, I know as of the point he left office, he had borrowed over $1 billion in today's money to finance some of those things he was doing and that was how they were able to tie his hands. So how do you operate?
Not really. They didn't tie his hands in that way because he was very clear.
So he was forced to increase the taxes that cocoa farmers had to pay.
No, but that's not because of the loans. That's because they crashed the world, price of cocoa deliberately. You see,
but he has to pay. The goal was he needed to pay for the loan, so he had to look for money some other way.
No, that's not. Well, it wasn't about him looking for, because obviously, like you said, there was the Soviet Union, there were other people. Now, let's quickly take the question of if we're not independent, how do we survive? Because a lot of Africans have that mentality that we're in a fait accompli situation. That we cannot survive without the West. Look at Gaddafi. Gaddafi didn't owe anybody any money. Gaddafi was not, tied to the apron strings of the IMF or the World Bank or anybody else. Libya had no debts. But yet, and there was no quote-unquote poverty or, everybody in Libya had accommodation, and housing and social services. But they were still able to take Gaddafi out. So the point I'm making is this, that it's not about, you can't survive without them, because you can survive without them. And which brings us back to Nkrumah. That was Nkrumah's agenda. How do we survive without, the imperialist, spoon feeds? And we do that by African unity, which is his most powerful legacy. The question of Pan-Africanism, the question of African unity. Now, African unity is not a romantic thing that, we join together because we love each other. We join together because there is strength in unity. There is power in unity. Look at the European Union and the desperate attempts they are making to hold on to it, because they know that individually they will collapse, but that as a union, they face the world as one people. Look at China. China had to go through that civil war, internal war. They blocked themselves up, closed the whole country, and sorted themselves out internally before they opened back China as one entity, one powerful, strong entity. This is the vision that Nkrumah had for a unified Africa, for a liberated, for one Africa.
Hearing you now, it looks like some people might say you already have your agenda. You already set up your mind on what you're going to present in the documentary. You are not open to whatever the story leads you to, wherever, For instance, basically you can get a picture of what you are looking for if people listen to you. So are you open to wherever it takes us to, like your story, your documentary? If you talk to somebody that says, for instance, like opposition leaders who will say, because I was worried that I was reading about him and there was a point that he accepted to be called a life president. I mean, no matter how good you are, no matter how well you're doing, I do not think, even for that period, that wanting to be a life president will be something. So, for instance, if you're talking to somebody like me and I was his colleague and I have a different view, are you going to put that in your documentary?
We already have that, because we even from people who were his supporters, we asked them, challenging questions. What about the question of a one-party state? Because that is important. But so I'm saying that's already there. But let me tell you something. I know my history as an African woman. I'm not a blank slate. I'm not naive and I'm not ignorant, and I will not pretend to be, okay? So I'm very clear about that. I'm also clear about why we're making this documentary. We're making this documentary so that we're able to bring our history back to life. Okay, because right now it's hidden in a lot of archives, books, newspapers, and things. We want to bring it to life so that our people are able to see the things. And when you see the documentary, if you're able to challenge it, then you go and make your own documentary. But I'm saying that let's be very clear that this is a documentary made by a conscious, politically active African woman who knows her history, but who wants to bring that history to life for the next generation. So that's a mission, and there are lots of issues, and those issues will be looked at, But I'm saying that I'm not a naive, and and first and foremost, I'm a political organizer. I'm a political activist. That is my bottom line for African liberation. You understand? So I'm very clear about that, And one of the reasons why we're making this documentary, why our organization, Moyo Wataifa and the Moyo Pan-African Solidarity
What is
Network,
that? What is that?
Moyo Wataifa is a Pan-African women's advocacy, and we have Solidarity Center. People can go check us out on www.solidaritycenter.org. Center is spelled CENTRE. SolidarityCenter.org. We're an international advocacy, organization. We do a lot of work, around advocacy on different levels. People get more information there. But I'm saying that we're clear about why we're going in to do the documentary. We're clear about bringing our history back to life. But you touched on something about, somebody wanted to remain life president. We're able to say, Gaddafi was there for 40-something years. The Queen of England, how many years has she been queen for?
But she's not the executive leader of United Kingdom.
This is the problem with us. We don't know the way things work. We take things at face value. Look at the United States. You think you have democracy in the US? What you have is two sides of the same coin. You have one system, and they change. It's like a team. You have the red team. Or rather, you're wearing wine. You have the wine team and you have the brown team. So for 4 years, the brown team comes on. The next time is the red team, and then somebody says that's democracy. That is not democracy. They have one system. You understand? So it's time for us to also have a system that is pro-African, that is pro-African liberation. So I'm not into this fake analysis, superficial analysis, which we've sucked ourselves into. I mean, in the US, they have other parties on the ballot. But nobody around the world knows that there are other parties on the ballot because nobody bothers with them. They're just two main parties, and they switch between themselves. Like I'm saying, these are serious things that, we'll need a longer time, to go into. But I'm saying let's not be fooled by these things. And finally, on this issue, let me say something. When you have a revolution, it's not a tea party, and it's not a joke. To even prosecute the revolution, it takes a lot of sacrifice. To sustain the revolution against the enemies of that change, it takes a lot of fight and sacrifice for us to get a solid foundation. Precisely because most of us African countries, we've had fake independence. It's just bringing down the flag, replacing it with another one. The system has not changed. The team has changed. We used to have the white team. Now we have the black team, but the same system. So would you prefer for the system to change, or you are happy with what you see as democracy, whereas it's just a change in the color of the team players? This is the discussion, we need to have. We need to begin to have serious, in-depth analysis and stop having discussions based on how the West wants us, to have our narratives, to play the game like they play. They have the same system. They've been exploiting us for close to 500 years. Nothing has changed, but they want us to change. I am interested in an African revolution. I'm interested in a fundamental, system of transformation for my continent, when the people in the villages begin to live on the same level as the people in the cities, when we have the same access to resources. That's what I'm interested in. And whosoever brings that, I'm all for that.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. We've been talking to Affiong Affiong. She is the executive director of the Women's Solidarity Network, a Pan-African organization. So that's it. We'll be back with more of our shows. Until then, stay tuned.